All right. Well, Dr. John L. Terry III, also known as what is the name of your company? Black Belt Leader.
I'm known as the Black Belt Leader. So the name of my company is Black Belt Leadership.
Okay, we are going to unpack that, sir, for sure. Welcome today to the Optimize Advisor podcast. We appreciate you taking the time with us to share your insights and your expertise, which is seemingly a very unique take with your background in leadership. So I'm very pleased and excited to have you on the show.
I'm very glad to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
So let's talk a little bit about your background. Let me do you a proper introduction, high level, then maybe you could double click on it a little bit. So you are in the martial arts Hall of Fame, 3 times inductee, international speaker, trainer, and best-selling author, founder of Black Belt Leadership, recipient of the Presidential Lifetime Achievement Award. And what's interesting is I'm seeing set the theme, how to discover and deploy the Black Belt Leader within. We are going to dive into that, sir. So talk a little bit about your unique background and how you came to be on this episode today.
Well, Scott, it's an interesting story. When I was 13, my parents relocated from a big city to a small town, and I became the target of every bully in school. Well, my dad had this great fix. I wanted to move back to Fort Smith, Arkansas, and to get away from the bullies and go hide and be a nobody at school. Dad had other plans. He enrolled me in martial arts. Now, at the age of 13, back in the 70s, kids weren't taught the martial arts. That was something that was an adult foray. But the instructor of the school, my dad had just sold him a house full of furniture, shared my story. And as a result of that, ended up being accepted into his class as a 13-year-old scrawny kid. That was the good, the bad, and the ugly. So dad's paying good money for me to get beat up by grown men. And worse than that, dad's paying good money for me to get beat up by this 23-year-old girl that had joined the class at the same time I did. And I ended up being her partner. So dad's paying good money 3 days a week for a girl to beat me up and then going to school and getting beat up. It wasn't working. And I complained and I said, Dad, this isn't working. I said, I wanted the bullying to stop and I'm getting beat up by a girl. My dad, in his infinite wisdom, said, son, when you learn to fight like a girl, the bullying at school will stop. So I took that to heart and began to learn, because that girl could whip any man in class. And when I got to the point I could beat her, I could hold my own with every adult man in class. And as a result of that, my confidence changed, and never had to use the martial arts in school, but I was able to walk with a quiet confidence that allowed me to overcome bullying in a very unique way. And I fell in love with the martial arts as a result of that, Scott. And one of the things I've discovered over now more than 5 decades in training in the martial arts is there's a significant number of leadership principles that are embedded all throughout the martial arts that teach us how to live our lives in a way that is serving other people, that is leadership focused, and making sure that we become a very best version of ourselves that we can every single day, and focused on constant improvement. So that really kind of became my foray into the leadership world. I've been privileged to train with Dr. John Maxwell, the foremost authority on leadership, for a number of years, and realized that anybody can be a leader, but not everybody can be a black belt leader. And that's really where the distinction came into be, is I teach people how to become a black belt master of who they are and what they do as they discover, develop, and deploy that own unique black belt leader within, that superpower that they were born with, that passion, that calling, that purpose. And as they develop that and fulfill that, they find this incredible opportunity to make a difference in the world around them. And that's what I focus on doing.
You know, I know it's not the same, although I'm sure there's parallels and similarities, but what comes to mind is the book Good to Great, right? It's
100%.
It's I'm not going to say it's easy, but many organizations are good organizations.
Right.
What separates the good from the great? And it's a stack of very little things that are probably the hardest to do.
It is. Yes.
And I would imagine there are many individuals who enter into any form of martial arts. They get 3/4 or 80% of the way there. And it's that last 10 or 20% that sets the boys from the men.
That's right. You know, and if you think about it, and statistically, less than 5% of any individual that enrolls in the martial arts ever makes it to black belt. And we see the same in business, that we see so many businesses that start, and the businesses starting today 10 years from now, 70% of those businesses aren't going to be here anymore because they don't have the opportunity to survive. And it's like climbing a mountain. I was privileged a few years ago to have an opportunity to meet Sir Edmund Hillary Jr., and we were both sharing a stage, and he was telling the story of retracing his dad's footsteps up Mount Everest. And he was talking about the number of people that attempted to climb the mountain, got so far up the mountain, and for them, that was as far as they could go. And they settled for less than getting to the top. And how many businesses do that very same thing? If we go back to, Jim's book that you talked about, Good to Great, Jim Collins talks about that in his incredible work. But we oftentimes get to a certain point in our business that we settle, and when we achieve success, that becomes an end point rather than an inflection point of what's next in the opportunity to keep going higher.
That's a great point, which brings me to a very important thought that I want to hold off on, because I think there's a number of intellectual and psychological headwinds that people have that they don't address. But let's set that aside for now and take this one step at a time. On a personal level, which I understand that there's overlap, but what does it really mean for you personally to being that black belt leader in life?
For me, it's an opportunity to daily become a better version of who I am and what I do, because I have chosen to live my life to the fullest. I have chosen every day to unpack what I do not yet know that I can apply to my life so that I can serve the people I'm serving ever better. And that's the problem I see with a lot of people today, is they get to a point in their life that they choose to say, this is as far as I'm going to go in my journey. Very similar to what we were talking about with the mountain a moment ago. And when they get to that point, they stop. Now, to me, I think that's a lack of belief. They only believe they can go so far. Look at your industry that you're in. How many financial advisors can see themselves as being a $50 million a year annuity producer or a $1 million a year life producer? The potential is there, but unless they believe they're capable of doing that, there's no way they're going to become that stellar sales individual that really serves their customers and clients at the highest level. So at the end of the day, it really comes back to belief, because I talk about it in my book, Black Belt Leadership 101, and it's the very first leadership principle of being a black belt leader, and that's belief, and the fact that you cannot achieve what you do not believe.
That's a great point. I've got a few questions on the book as well. But hold on, if we could pause for a moment. I can imagine, so for sure, this is the case for everyone, in the sense that your experiences in life and the perceptions that you have shape your reality. And you having that background, and even starting with that initial story of how you even found martial arts and changing the way that your life was going for the better. But, how did martial arts training shape your views? Or maybe you could reflect on a specific moment during your martial arts journey of discipline or resilience that affected you, that you now translate into a core principle within just leadership and business in general.
For me, it goes back to that very first same principle I was just talking about, Scott. It's belief. And when I learned that I could believe that I was capable of saying, of doing, of becoming, and achieving more, all of a sudden I saw a life before me with no limits. Prior to getting involved in the martial arts and living life as a child afraid, all I wanted to do was to hide. I didn't want to go and explore and do the things I thought I was capable, or somewhat dreamed that I was capable of doing. But it's when I got involved in the martial arts and I began to build that confidence in myself that I knew I could handle myself in any situation. And that began to stretch me and grow me. And as I began to learn the forms, as I began to learn how to compete, as I began to learn how to fight and engage in self-defense and disarm an individual from, having a gun at my head or a knife at my back, and learning to do those things from a self-defense perspective, the ability for me to be able to stretch the quality of my thinking allowed me to see that I am capable of doing more than what I believed I was just a few months before. And that kind of became an overarching principle in my life of
Hmm.
every day believing there's more that I can do. And I ask the question every day, what's next?
In your book, I mean, thank you for that. And I completely agree and appreciate with that. In your book, you talk about discovering, developing, and deploying that black belt leader that I would presume is in all of us, right? It's just a matter of learning it and letting it shine. Can you break down those three stages and how they apply to our profession?
Absolutely. There's 10 qualities, and I talk about this in my book, Black Belt Leadership 101. There's 10 qualities you've got to build into your life to discover, develop, and deploy what I call your black belt leader within. And that's your gifting, that's your talent, that's your passion or your calling. Well, the first is belief that we've already talked about. The second is learning. You've got to become a subject matter expert on whatever your calling or your passion is. If you're a financial advisor, you've got to become a subject matter expert on insurance, investments, banking, whatever it is you do. If you're an
Amen.
architect or an
Amen to
engineer,
that.
the very same thing applies. Dentist, doctor, pick the profession. You got to become a subject matter expert. That's the L. The A is you've got to have the opportunity to be accountable. You got to be accountable to yourself, to hold yourself to the deadlines you've set. You got to be accountable to daily grow yourself. You got to be accountable to the people that you're leading, the people that you're following, and the people that you're serving. Next comes the C. This is black belt as an acronym. Now you've got to learn to communicate, because everybody communicates, but very few people connect because they don't communicate well. And you and I can have similar ideas, but if I can't explain to you what I'm speaking and you understand it exactly as I'm saying it, there's miscommunication. Now, in your field of in the financial profession that you're in, very important, because you're relaying information about insurance, investments, other things that the clients need to know. And so the advisors that you're working with have got to be able to clearly articulate the financial products and services that those clients are engaging with and how they help them achieve their goals, their dreams, and their objectives. Now, the K is kinetic, because to be able to discover, develop, and deploy, you got to be willing to take action. You can't be the LeBron James, the Michael Jordan, the Kobe Bryant of your industry if you spend all your time sitting on the bench. So part of discovering, developing, deploying is you've got to take the action steps to learn, to grow, to apply, and then to begin to teach others so you get really, really good at whatever it is that you do. The next step in the process is boldness. You've got to be willing to go first and get out there and take that uncomfortable step that nobody else is willing to take, because that's when you have the opportunity to get into that space where growth happens. Growth doesn't happen in that comfortable status quo place. It happens when we get into the unknown. From there, we move into the E, which is equipping. And part of discovering, developing, and deploying yourself as a black belt leader is learning to equip the other people who will one day take your place. Because the role of a leader is to replace himself at some point down the road. I mean, think about the industry you're in. Think about a dentist. If a dentist doesn't raise up someone else in his profession, when he retires, who takes care of his patient? If an architect doesn't raise someone up inside their business to be able to take over and run that business, who then crafts and designs the buildings when that architect is gone? That's a part of the process that we often miss. And then that last two letters is L, loyalty. You build loyalty to yourself. You build loyalty to your team as you work together to achieve your passion, your calling, and your purpose. And if you do those things, the last thing that happens is your life begins to transform as you daily become a better version of who you are and what you do. And as your life transforms, you transform the people around you, making their lives better as a result.
I love that. There's a few that are core to our company as well, and some mantras or quotes that I regularly say is, it does begin with knowledge. I mean, you do have to be a product matter expert. We are the extension of an advisor's practice, or at least we strive to be, right? Their trusted relationship and trusted expert. But it starts within, right? We have to commit to lifelong learning. And as soon as we think we learn everything, then something changes, right?
Absolutely.
And so
Yeah.
as long as you accept that and commit to that, you're always growing from a knowledge standpoint. And look, the mind's a muscle as well. We've got to exercise it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Albert Einstein said it well. We think of Albert Einstein as this brilliant scientist that, developed E equals MC squared and helped develop the atomic bomb. But one of his most brilliant statements, in my opinion, is this. He says, the world as we have created it is a process of our thinking. And that world cannot be changed without changing our thinking.
Hmm.
And there's an old saying, as you think, you become.
Absolutely.
And I like to say, as you think, you say, you do, and you become. But once you stop thinking, you stop saying, you stop doing, and you stop becoming.
Absolutely. And that's the part that I didn't want to rush into all the while. So two things. There's two sides really of the same coin. Number one, I think some people can't get it out of their own way from an ego standpoint. So that's that leadership style, the loyalty, the fact that the best leaders rise up those within the organization and are not only at peace with it, but flourish in it, right? They feed into the talented people around them. And let's be honest, that's what makes organizations great.
Yeah.
It's not just the leaders. Yeah, I mean, the leader maybe is the one who inspired the idea and does help to bring along the group, but you gotta be inspirational, right?
Right. Yeah.
The others, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, pause. I'll pause.
No, I was going to say that, it's the leader's job to carry the vision and to establish the culture. It's the leader's job to empower and equip the individuals in their team so they can lead themselves and lead others so that you eventually build an organization of leaders. And when you have an organization of leaders, not an organization of followers, you're now building a high performance, non-leader dependent team because everybody knows their role. Everybody's in the right seat in the organization, acting in the area of their greatest giftedness, and they're all contributing to the vision and the purpose and the calling of that leader, knowing that together they're all growing themselves so that organization can continue. In the event that senior leader at some point steps away, the rest of the team can continue to move on and perpetuate that into the future.
Very, very well said. I really appreciate how concise that explanation was. You make it sound so simple. Simple's not easy.
That's right.
A lot of people confuse those two. Just get out of the damn way, right? Get great people on the bus, get them in the right seat, and get out of the damn way.
Right.
Easier said than done for many. The other side of the coin is, which you touched on, I think is also this psychological headwind of fear and self-doubt. Oftentimes it's personal sabotage. It's like, how do you help individuals break that headwind or get out from underneath that? Yeah. There's greatness in everyone.
There is greatness in everyone. It all goes back to belief. That is the very first principle, that you've got to be willing to believe in yourself. And sadly, we've got a generation of people that are growing up today, and nobody's taken the time to say, I believe in you. And one of the things I heard Dr. John say many, many years ago, speaking of Dr. John Maxwell, he was speaking to a group of brand new coaches that were getting into the coaching space. And Dr. John made a statement from the stage that was powerful. He said, I believe in you, and I believe in what you are capable of becoming. He said, you may not see it yet, but I can. And until you can see it for yourself and believe it for yourself, use my belief in you as the driving force to take action. And that's another role of the leader that we often miss, is that people on the team that don't believe in themselves, they've never had anybody equip them. They've never had anybody encourage them. They've never had anybody pour into them to say, I believe in you and I see you excelling in this area, and giving them permission to fail and fail forward so that they learn and have the opportunity through those failures and learning the lessons that are part of growing up and growing in that position to become world class in that particular area. Think about how many times some of the greatest basketball players in history have gone to the free throw line and missed a shot. Well, that wasn't the end of their career. And at that point, they didn't say, I don't believe. They kept shooting the shots until it became second nature. And for many of us, it's doing those things that are uncomfortable and suddenly realizing, oh, I can do that. And now the confidence begins to build And then the next thing you know, they're leading in that area because they finally have taken your belief in them and accepted it as their own, added their belief to it. And at that point, now they're unstoppable.
Yeah, I say this to our team, and I say this publicly to the advisors we're blessed and fortunate to work alongside. And like I say, it's not about perfection. As humans, this is the beautiful part about it. We're perfectly imperfect. That's the whole point of it. And hence the name. What is it about? It's about optimization and accepting the fact that we will never get to perfection or perfect. But if we always commit to just getting a little better, wherever I came from, if I can continue to get a little bit better and improve and quote unquote optimize, then I'm doing the right things. And like you said, a great little analogy of nobody makes every free throw shot. Even if you practice hours and hours a day, you're still going to miss some. You're never going to make 100% of all the free throws. And same goes in our work life. As leaders, we got to inspire. We got to entrust. It's also an interesting thing. A lot of leaders, I think, struggle with, well, you know what? I can just do it better myself. And if I want to do it right, I got to do it myself. And that's not a growth mindset, is it?
No, it's not. And I actually talk about that in my book, The Black Belt Secrets of Success. And the fact that, and that's actually one of the 7 saboteurs of success that's going to be part of my new book coming out in January, calling Mastering Business Success. But when you've got an individual, and I see this a lot in the financial services industry, where I've coached a lot of financial advisors over 30 plus years in working in this industry. And that's a common thing I see is they start out as a solopreneur, and at first they're having to do it all. And then they finally get to the point they hire a team member, but they never empower that team member to take any of the real load off of them. And as a result of that, they put a roadblock in their own way. And it limits their ability to grow and to scale because they're unwilling to develop the people around them and give them an opportunity to lead in that area. So one of the things that I teach when I'm out working with organizations is the 80-20 rule, the Pietro principle. And what I tell individuals is this: if somebody can do the role 80% as good as you can do it, let them do it and let them take ownership of it and grow into that space. Because you're going to be the most successful when you're spending 80% of your day doing the 20% of things you're best at doing. And if I can get everybody in the organization spending 80% of their day doing the 20% of things they're best at doing, that's where we create those high performance organizations that are going to wow their clients and create that exceptional experience that keeps the customer coming back because they're serving them at an ever growing, ever higher level.
That's great input. Can I ask you a personal question about your success in establishing and building an IMO?
Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit. Thank you. I appreciate that. This is my personal interest, but it applies, right? One of the areas of our podcast is to learn from other optimized advisors. And I do like to push the envelope with that. And really, an entrepreneur is an optimized advisor, right? You go through the same challenges and trials and tribulations and all of that and building a business. And so I'm curious about your journey of establishing and building your IMO. Maybe a particular instance comes to mind of a real challenge that you faced in growing and how you solve that problem or that challenge.
My IMO started by accident, and that was many, many years ago when I built that. I was a personal producer, became very successful at what I did in the independent space. And I had other advisors that came to me and says, "Can you teach me to do what you do?" Well, I started teaching advisors and then realized I was creating my own competition. And then I started getting calls from these insurance companies that saying, "How would you like to be able to train advisors and do what you're doing, but get paid to do so?" And I said, "Well, how do we do that?" And they said, "Well, we have an opportunity to provide you with a contract that you can contract other individuals underneath you, and you'll make an override off of their production." And well, I had 2 questions. I said, first, what's an override? Because at that point, I didn't know what it was. And secondly is, how do we do it? And so as a result of that, I picked up some life contracts, and through some individuals I met, was introduced to the health business, got involved with the health insurance industry, became very, very successful with an individual health carrier called Continental General several years ago. And from that began to build this organization. But for me, the very thing that I was talking about earlier, that 80-20 rule, I had to learn that the hard way. Because when I started my IMO, it was me, myself, and I, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I began to bring individuals on. But at first, I gave them little petty things to do that I really didn't want to do. And they spend a lot of their time trying to figure out what to do while they were getting paid, and I was doing the bulk of the work. And at some point, my dad came into my life, and Dad's one of these brilliant men that just sees incredible things. And he came in and he said, son, at some point, he says, you're going to have to cut some of the weights off your hook. I said, what do you mean? He said, you've got so much weight on your hook, that beautiful worm that you're trying to get to attract the advisors to your business is setting in the bottom of the mud because you're trying to do too many things yourself. He said, if you'll take some weights off of you by letting your team actually do what you hired them to do, and you take that weight off, now that lure is going to float where it's going to attract more of the advisors that you want to work with. That was a watershed moment for me because I realized the importance at that moment of empowering people and giving them the opportunity to lead and letting them fail and fail their way to success. And as a result of that, built an incredible team that they knew what they had to do. They knew what each other did, and they were all cross-trained, but everybody operated in their greatest area of strength and their giftedness. And as a result of that, we saw incredible success.
So in that time, the people that you had on the bus, was it pretty much already the same people or the correct people on the bus? It was just really I didn't say a you thing of unlocking their true potential.
It was a me thing. It was, I didn't want to let go of what I had built because I started as a solopreneur and I thought I could do it better than them. Mm-hmm. But I realized that to scale, I had to zero down on what I was best at doing and let other people that were better at some things that I was okay at, but not the best at, letting them take ownership of that and scale that to a level that I couldn't do because it wasn't my greatest area of strength. And I mean, think about that. I'm really, really good at communication. I'm really, really good at sales and marketing. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'm probably an 8 or a 9. Right. But if it came to certain administrative tasks, I'm a 4 or a 5. Now, if I get an improvement and I can go from 4 to 6, great. But if I can go from 8 to 10, which is better? So I learned early on to allow people to have the opportunity to step into the area of their greatness and empower them and give them the tools they need and then let them go and let them figure it out. They're going to do it a little differently than me, and that's okay, as long as we're driving to the same ultimate goal at the end of the day, and that was serving the agents that we worked with and helping them serve their clients as best as they could. That brought us the success that we wanted to see in the organization.
That's outstanding. That's great. Good for you. I'm glad to hear. And now, how long did that journey last before, that chapter in your life
That
closed?
Journey ran almost a decade before I shifted more into the coaching and training space, because I found in the area of my giftedness, helping other people identify their roadblocks, learn to be better communicators, and understand the human behavior element of working with customers. That really kind of became one of my superpowers. And as I spent more time doing that, it didn't make sense to do the other. And that kind of led me into this role that I'm doing now, and absolutely love what I'm doing.
So in light of that, you've been honored with the Presidential Lifetime Achievement Award and recognized as one of Brains Magazine's top global leaders. Talk to me a little bit more about what the heck that means. And I guess more so, what are those types of acknowledgments mean to you personally or professionally?
The Presidential Lifetime Achievement Award, that was an incredible surprise. I didn't see that coming, didn't know anything about it. I was actually hosting, I run the United States Martial Arts Hall of Fame, and that's my give back to the martial arts community. I've been privileged to run that organization since 2015. And I was actually doing an event in Louisville, Kentucky. And one of the individuals that came to that event said, John, I have a very special presentation I'd like to make to you. Well, normally when I go to a city and I do an event, oftentimes a dignitary will come and they want to present me with a proclamation or something like that for bringing the Hall of Fame event there. But out of the blue, this individual steps up and says, I want to recognize you with a Presidential Lifetime Achievement Award for
Wow,
leadership.
that's cool.
I'm like, wow, and the
Mhm.
place erupted. And, to me, it was humbling, but it was an acknowledgement of the years of unseen, unheard, unknown preparation, and the hours of what I call unspectacular preparation in preparing to be the leader that I've become today. That was just an acknowledgement that all of those years of hard work, somebody other than me recognized and said, thank you. And same thing with, Brains Magazine being one of their top 500 global leaders and influencers a couple of years ago. That was a unique honor to be recognized as one of 500 individuals that have become a thought leader in this industry when it comes to leadership.
So, within the context of motivating teams and us as leaders, what role do you feel recognition and celebration plays in just the energy and the synergy of growing a business? And specifically, what have you done within your experience that you really can say, damn it, this worked really, really well?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll say it this way. In my book, Black Belt Secrets of Success, Chapter 3, I actually talk about climbing the Mount Everest of success. And one of the camps that you visit as you're climbing this mountain is the camp where you celebrate the wins. And I love the way Tony Robbins says it. Tony Robbins says, what gets rewarded gets repeated.
Mm-hmm.
And if we want to see success repeated in the future, we've got to recognize and we've got to reward it. And it's the little things. It can be just an encouraging word. It can be a pat on the back. It can say, hey, great job. Something that we do to acknowledge the win is important, because when we acknowledge the win, there's a chemical release in our brain that says, hey, whatever you just did just made your body feel great. Go do that again. And so we go to achieve more success. And when we do, we get that same chemical release in our brain that says, hey, this is great. Do it again. That's how we begin to build success habits in our lives. And as we build success habits in our lives by recognizing and rewarding not just our wins, but the wins of the individual that help us achieve that, now as a team, we get an opportunity to celebrate the things that we did right that made a difference in the lives of other people.
Mm-hmm.
And when we pause to recognize that, to reward that in some small way, now the team wants to go do it again, and they can't wait to go serve somebody else. I mean, think about it. If you've got an agent that goes and let's say he sells a life insurance policy and he delivers that policy, 6 months later, that individual tragically passes away. And now he's delivering a $500,000 life insurance check to the family. And that moment, he's recognizing in a unique way the reward of what he did by providing for that family when that breadwinner was gone. Mm-hmm. That moment right there is going to inspire that individual to say, what I did made a difference. Let's go do it again. Now, it might be if you hit a production goal, you take the team out to, for a steak dinner, or you take them out and you do barbecue, or you go rent a ski boat and go spend a day on the lake together. Doing things together to build camaraderie and celebrate wins is important.
All the above. I love that. I really appreciate that as well. So, okay, I'm listening to all this. I'm taking this all in. What's one thing that I can do as a leader to start doing today to become more of that black belt leader? That difference between just being a leader and being in that top 5%.
It's doing just a little bit more. And I describe it as the 1% rule. If you could identify one area in your life that you want to improve in, and you can improve just 1% in that area every single day for the next 30 days, that's a 30% improvement in that one area of your life. And if we can repeat that over and over again, we begin to build success habits that are going to move us to ever higher levels of success.
So in your level of experience, throw out one or two examples of things that you've seen regularly where it's like, this is the one thing.
So it could be time management. We're all given 24 hours a day,
Right.
But how much time do we squander every single day by doing things that are ineffective or simply waste our time?
Mm-hmm.
So it could be simply asking the question, is this the best use of my time right now? And if I can get 1% better every day on managing the 24 hours I have, at the end of 30 days, I've gotten 30% better, a
Mm-hmm.
full third of my day better of being able to effectively manage my time. And that's just one example that I see often where people put a roadblock in their way by mismanaging the time they're given every day.
Right. Which I would then say is a big mistake. Not necessarily it's not an intentional mistake. It's just a mistake that happens and something that I avoid as a leader. Are there any other, front facing big mistakes that leaders make that you see often, and another thing that they can easily avoid?
Yeah, to me, it's the failure to grow themselves. Ray Kroc
Mm-hmm.
was the founder of the McDonald's franchise. He took what the McDonald brothers couldn't do and turned it into a global empire. And Ray told his franchisees early on a very powerful statement. He said, as long as you're green, you're growing. But once you're ripe, you start to rot. And so one of the things that I would challenge the individuals listening to the podcast is this. You've got to improve the quality of your thinking, because as you improve the quality of your thinking, you're going to improve the quality of your saying, doing, and becoming. But once you stop improving the quality of your thinking, it's just like separating a tomato from the vine. If it's no longer getting the nutrients coming into the vine, what happens to that tomato? It's red for a little while, but then eventually it begins to dry out, it begins to turn black, and it begins to turn rotten. What I've seen in the financial services industry over the years is people go get their license, they do a little bit of training, and once they learn a system or they learn a product or two, they quit learning, they quit growing. And as a
Mm-hmm.
result of that, when they go to serve their client, they're not serving their client at the highest level. And as a result of that, whether they realize it or not, they're becoming a rotten advisor. Now, the overarching success principle of my book, Black Belt Secrets of Success, is this. Successful people do daily what unsuccessful people do sometimes or not at all. And one of the things successful people do is they focus on daily personal growth. And if that's not a part of who you are and what you're doing, you're slowly starting to rot, not only personally, but professionally.
That is so true. Okay. I'm a listener to this episode. I'm impressed with the conversation. How does one get in contact with you and go deeper with your teachings? Where should they begin?
So the easiest way to do that is to go to my website, blackbeltleadership.com. Everything John Terry, the Black Belt Leader, is there. If you go to the Contact Us section of the website, you can subscribe to my podcast. You can subscribe to my newsletter. I've got teaching and training content that's there, some free, some paid. You can book me to come in and train your organization, to speak at your events. Everything you need to know about me, blackbeltleadership.com.
And also a brief plug, I guess, in the sense that we've brought on a new relationship, which we're very excited about in our IMO, our insurance planning firm, Optimize Insurance Planning, with Legacy Marketing Group. And you have a tenure with them and experience with them. So I'm sure there's also some access to content, to trainings, to teachings that you've done through that relationship. And maybe tell me just a little more about that.
Absolutely. That's one of the things I'm doing now in my current relationship with Legacy is I act as a trainer and do special projects for them. So industry events I speak at, conferences I speak at, I'm invited to go into organizations and actually do some of the training things that we talked about, looking at the areas where, your organization may be struggling to see success, or you're trying to get to that what's next and can't quite figure that out. Those are some of the things that Legacy has tasked me to do in my role in serving them as the Black Belt Leader.
That's great to see that there's not that they're in the true sense of the word, an insurance company, but they are quasi operating as such. And it's refreshing to see firms like them investing in the professional and personal development of the insurance professionals and, investment professionals that they have the opportunity to work with and go beyond just manufacturing product, right? I mean, that's kind of the quote unquote bar minimum, but to see firms go above and beyond is exemplary and very much appreciated. So kudos to them and kudos to you.
Well, thank you, sir. For every dollar that an individual invests in personal growth and development, studies show that you get a $7 ROI in terms of performance increase in your organization. That to me is why I think personal growth is so important, because if you can get a 7x ROI on discovering, developing, and deploying yourself and become a better version of who you are and what you do, you're going to serve your clients at a higher level. You're going to stand out as unique and different in the marketplace. You're going to attract more of the type of customers you want to work with. And all of a sudden, you're going to see success at a level you never believed was possible.
Look, if I could get a 7x return on any investment, I'm winning in the game of life.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Terry's website, www.blackbeltleader.com, correct?
Blackbeltleadership.com. Yep.
Okay, black belt. Thank you. Blackbeltleadership.com. I'm sure they can search you out on the World Wide Web and connect with you that way as well, or check them out on with Legacy Marketing. I appreciate you very much, sir. This has been very informative and enlightening. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. We very much appreciate it. Cheers to you. Till next time.
The Optimized Advisor podcast is intended for financial professionals only. The content discussed is for informational and educational purposes and should not be construed as financial, investment, legal, or tax advice. Listeners should consult their own professional advisors before implementing any strategies discussed. Views expressed are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of Optimized Insurance Planning or its affiliates.